Chapter 8 Journey to Hyrule Castle. Link just wanted to go home. Weeks ago, the chance to adventure into the wide and unknown expanse of Hyrule would have filled him with wonder. Even though home could be boring sometimes, he knew it was safe. There, his biggest worry was a bully named Mido and his not terribly bright lackeys. He didn't seem like a big deal compared to what Link had encountered since leaving the forest. Had the Great Deku-Tree made a mistake? Had he been so close to death that he'd been unable to think straight? It was possible, Link thought. Perhaps he was never meant to leave the forest. But then, no. Sara had known he would leave. The mizzle that had persisted through the small hours of the night dampened his mood. He sat in the doorway of the stables, his arms sore after an hour of helping move boxes into Talon's cart. He hadn't slept much, and despite Talon's suggestion, he didn't want to rest. The boxes he had been carrying were laden with bottles of milk and enchanted red ice. Navi told him that only a fire mage could make it melt, and it helped keep the bottles of milk cold. Link only managed to load 3 boxes into the cart. On his 4th run, he tripped over a stray chicken. Both crate and boy went crashing to the earth, while the chicken hobbled off to its coop, clucking angrily all the while. The bottles that tumbled from the box shattered with a loud crash. Talon came running over to see if he was all right, and didn't seem particularly angry. That didn't stop Link from feeling like a clumsy idiot. Talon sent him to sit down and have a rest, leaving him into the company of Navi and one of his friendlier hounds. Nosy was a young, sprightly dog with a white patch of fur upon his muzzle. Having given up trying to convince Link to throw a stick, and growing bored of chewing on Link's boots, he was now sitting with his head resting on Link's lap, staring with doleful puppy eyes. Getting the hint, Link yielded to the dog's request and idly scratched its ears. Nosy rolled his eyes, grunting with doggy contentment. Link watched Malon and Talon as they made their final preparations to depart. Talon was harnessing a horse, yawning loudly as he did so. Judging from Ingo's gruff tones, Talon had somehow tangled the horse in its harness. Malon quickly came over and offered to fix the problem, leaving the 2 adults to keep grumbling. Nobody was in a particularly good mood, not even Malon, which was to be expected. Her usual smile was gone, and she was ignoring Epona despite the filly's confused protest, which could have just been demand for more food. "Come on, Link," Talon called as he finished checking the tack. "Climb on back, we'll be off in a sec." "Sorry, Nosy," Link said apologetically. He stopped scratching the dog and got up. Nosy lay down on the straw, tail wagging, and rolled onto his back in a gesture. "Can you scratch my belly?" Link almost obliged, but Talon called to him. "Hurry up, we can't stand around here all day getting nothing done." Link could have sworn he saw Ingo, who was busily securing a crate into the wagon, pause and raise an eyebrow. Talon was none the wiser, and he was already walking off towards one of the storehouses. Ingo followed after him, whistling a command to Nosy. The dog took off, trotting towards the farmhand. Link trudged wearily over to the cart and clambered onto it. Navi landed on top of one of the boxes, her eyes inadvertently drifting to the blackened ruins. Link didn't follow her gaze. He wanted to block out the memory of what had happened. With the heavy smell of smoke still wafting from the wreckage, that was no easy task. "Link?" Malon was walking towards him, wearing a large cloak over her dress to keep out the winter chill. The woolen wrappings were too large for her, and dragged along the ground. She held a bundle in her hand, offering it to Link as she reached him. It turned out to be another cloak. "Here," she said. "Dad says you'll catch a cold if you don't wear something warmer." "Thanks," Link replied, throwing the woolen garment around his shoulders. It was warm, snug, and very heavy. How did anybody manage to move in one of these things? Malon climbed up beside him, and, each lost within their own thoughts, they just sat for a while. Link was glad when the crunch of earth announced Talon's arrival. "Well, I think we're ready. Or, as ready as we can be." Talon's eyes drifted to the ruined farmhouse and then back to the 2 children. Link had no idea how he could still manage to sound jovial. "We get moving fast enough, we'll have plenty of time for a hot meal at the other end. How's that sound?" He grinned, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. "You said that last time," Malon complained sourly. "We ended up with cold stew." "Well," Talon's grin faded slightly, "we'll see what we can do this time." The rest of their small party arrived, forming a tight gathering around the wagon. Talon spoke a command to his horse, and with a lurch, the wagon trundled out of the gates. Link sat in silence, watching the walls of Lon Lon grow smaller. Soon the cart rounded a hill, and then both town and ranch vanished from sight. The mist cleared, revealing the verdant meadows of Hyrule Field beneath a cold winter sky. The frost that still clung to the grass glimmered in the dawn light. 5 soldiers rode beside the cart like an honor guard, dressed in full armor with a helm that covered their faces. Ciara joined their somber party, riding at the head, preferring a small amount of solitude. They were nearly a third of the way to Kakariko when Malon spoke. "Father says he's taking me to Ordon after he finishes deliveries tomorrow," Malon said. "I'm going to stay with my cousins for a while." "Is he going to stay with you?" Navi asked, seizing the opportunity to make conversation. "I hope so," Malon said. "My cousins are kind of annoying." Malon was staring at her shoes rather than Link. He didn't need to guess why. She drew a deep breath and filled with her hair. Link only just heard her mumble, "Thanks for saving me." She blushed at her own words. "You were really brave, fairy boy. I woke when I heard someone turning the door handle. I thought maybe it was you or Dad. I never thought—" Her voice faltered, and she looked away. "There was someone else in the house," Navi finished for her. They lapsed into silence, and Malon shivered. "I was scared too," Link admitted. Feeling uncomfortable, he decided to change the subject. "Is Epona going with you?" "No, she's staying on the ranch. Bernard and Gavin will take good care of her. It's only Ingo that hates her, but that's just because she kicks him every time he gets close enough. Most of the horses don't like him." "I wonder why," Navi muttered sarcastically. Link gave her a look, but before she could respond, the wagon lurched to a sudden halt. This abrupt stop upset several crates, and Link quickly jumped to help Malon prevent them from tipping. He'd seen his fair share of accidents this morning, and didn't entertain the thought of another one. "What's going on?" Malon asked. "Wait here," Talon called over his shoulder. "I'm just going to check something." "Check what?" Navi asked, zipping up into the air to get a better look. Gerudo? Link thought apprehensively. Knowing it wouldn't help Malon, he tried not to let his fears show. Nothing threatening emerged from the surrounding hills. Nobody else shared the road, and there had been no outcry from the guards. So what was wrong? "The guard spotted something, that's all," Navi shouted as she scoped out their surroundings. Hardly comforting. For the first time, Link could hear voices raised in consternation. It sounded like the guards were having an argument. Link considered clambering on top of the crates to have a look, but then decided that this was a bad idea. Instead, he jumped off the wagon. "What are you doing?" Malon shouted. "Daz had to wait." "I'm not going far," he called over his shoulder. He rounded the front of the cart. The first thing he noticed was that Talon's black mare was unsettled, shifting restlessly, her ears twitching to catch any sound on the wind. The cause of her concern seemed to be the guards who'd clustered around something. Talon, who was halfway towards them, called out, "What is it?" "A deer," one of the guards called back. "Not much left of it." "Poor thing," Talon said with dismay. "Must have met foul of a bear." "This doesn't look like the work of a bear," another man said, stepping sideways to make room for Talon. "Look here," he gestured at the ground. "I might not be a tracker, but I can tell those aren't bear paw prints." Link tried to catch a glimpse of the deer, but there were too many people crowded around it. He wandered towards the group, noticing Ciara standing in their midst. He finally caught sight of the animal, and suddenly wished he'd stayed where he was. Just as the guard had said, there was not much left to see. Nothing but congealed blood, bone, and fur. Bile rose in his throat, and Link turned away from the sight. He couldn't get the disturbing picture out of his mind, and wherever he looked, there were signs of a struggle. Specks of blood splattered the flattened grass, and not far away, hoofprints marked where the deer's flight had ended in blood and pain. There were paw prints too, far too large for an average farm dog, and oddly shaped for a wolf. "Wolfos," Navi muttered with a grimace. Link looked around at the guards. One of them appeared to have reached the same conclusion, but his companions were not so easily convinced. "It was definitely a Wolfos," Ciara affirmed. "Gods," one of the guards swore. "Never heard of them beasts travelling this far south of the mountains before. First the raids, then a bloody Gerudo attacks Lon Lon, Now I'm a wolf-horse. This isn't normal. It's witchcraft, I tell you. Meaning no offense, my lady." That last comment was directed at Ciara. "Why has King Johansson not spoken out against these raids? He has to do something soon, or else the people will be in an uproar," said another guard. "I'm sure he will." The faintest trace of worry betrayed Ciara's stoic countenance. Link looked around, suddenly frightened. He half expected a wolf-horse to come charging out of the grass and attack. Almost he could feel the beast's hot breath against the nape of his neck, and the sudden agony as its jaws clenched shut on him. He'd die, just like the deer whose bloodied remains lay scattered in the grass. Close as he was, Link noticed the stench of blood that hung in the air. It was an effort not to retch. "Link, I thought I told you to stay where you were." Link whirled around. Talon was standing behind him, worry written on his face. "It's all right, boy," he said, offering Link a gentle pat on the back. "Come on, get back in the wagon." "Are we going to be attacked by a wolf-horse?" Link blurted out, voicing his uncertainty. He didn't feel courageous. This sort of thing just wasn't supposed to happen to a Kokiri. Talon regarded him for a moment, his expression grim, and then he traded a glance with Navi. "I should have made sure you didn't see that," he said, sounding half annoyed with himself. "Wasn't a pretty sight, poor thing." He glanced back at the deer, and then gently added, "We have some of the finest soldiers in Hyrule and Ashika with us. They'll keep us safe. You'll see." He grabbed Link by the shoulder and steered him back towards the cart. "You okay?" Navi asked him quietly as they reached the wagon. "Fine," Link muttered, joining Malon on her perch. He wasn't fine, and judging by her pained expression, Navi knew he wasn't. As Talon had promised, there was no further signs of any wolf-horse. Despite this, Link couldn't help but notice how the guards now seemed spread out and far less casual than they had before. There was less laughter, and most of the conversation seemed muted. Afternoon finally came, and they stopped by the bridge across the Zora River to rest the horses. For Talon, this meant a good opportunity to take a nap. A few children were fishing by the river. Some of the younger ones were splashing each other with water, laughing themselves giddy with glee as they snuck up on their playmates. A small shack stood at the river's edge, with a sign nailed to a nearby post. "Fisherman's Shack. Zora are not permitted to swim near this premises." The inside of the shop reeked of gutted fish. The fisherman didn't seem to notice as he handed Melon a bucket of squirming bait and then passed Link 2 fishing rods. Sickened by the horrible odor of dead fish, Link was glad to lead the way out of the shack. From inside the shop came the man's merry whistling. "I don't think he can smell," Link muttered to himself, making his way back along the bank. They found their own spot, against the river, the calm atmosphere soon beginning to melt away at Link's somber mood. Malon seemed more cheerful herself, and was soon humming away quietly. It didn't take long for Link to attract some attention. After a little while, the younger children were all ogling at him and Navi. They looked away every time Link peeked at them, and whispered fervently amongst themselves. "Honestly," Navi said, peering out from under his cap and looking unamused, "you could probably try eating some fish bait if you want to get rid of them in a hurry." Malon scrunched her face in revulsion. "Ew, that's disgusting." Link looked down at the bucket of wriggling bait and couldn't help but agree with Malon. The Kokiri lived off the land, and while they were seldom fussy, most of them weren't that gross. Link had eaten grubs once, but only after Mido told him that he had to, or else he was a wimp. It'd been kinda slimy, and not very appealing. "Sorry, ruin your appetite?" Navi asked. Link shook his head. He was not feeling that hungry anyway. He looked up the hill towards Talon's cart. Ciara stood near the wagon, silent and still. Though the hood of her cloak was up, Link knew the woman was watching them closely. "She's scary, isn't she?" Malon asked as she noticed too. "A little," Link agreed. "Her eyes are creepy." "I heard she can kill you just by looking at you," Malon said. "Yeah, right," Link replied. Malon did have some strange ideas, or maybe it was just something to do with Hylians. Not being careful, he almost threaded his finger on the fishing hook. He jerked his hand back, then, fumbling with unsteady fingers, he finally threaded one of the wriggling worms onto the barb. He cast the line, smiling in satisfaction when he heard a faint plop. "See? I told you it was easy," Malon said cheerily. That was when something yanked on Link's fishing rod, hard. "Oh, you caught something," Malon squealed with delight. "Quick, reel it in!" Whatever it was, it yanked even harder, ripping the rod from Link's hands. He flung himself after it, snatching at the rod with both hands. As he did, a milk-white humanoid creature emerged from the water, and Link nearly scrambled back up the bank in shock. It wasn't a fish at all. It almost looked like one, with water glistening off the fins that jutted out from its arms and legs, and the cartilage over the back of its head was shaped like a fishtail. "Is that a Zora?" Link wondered, having never seen one before. It looked rather angry. Its black eyes narrowed and its face contorted into a scowl. Oops. Realizing he'd accidentally snared it on his hook, Link jumped to his feet and started scrambling up the bank. Malon followed him until they reached the top, and then, gasping for breath, they tumbled into the grass. When they did, Malon burst out laughing. You caught a Zora!" She sat up and pointed at the Zora, who was still shaking a fist at them, yelling something unintelligible. Unable to keep himself from joining in, Link laughed as well. It felt so good to laugh, even though he was in painful stitches. Ciara shook her head with an exasperated sigh and shuffled off down towards the Zora. The other children on the bank had long since scooted away. The owner of the fishing shack was telling the Zora off, while jabbing a finger at the sign in front of his cabin. By the time Link had finished laughing, he was almost certain that he'd cracked a rib. That was when he noticed Ciara standing over him, the tiniest hint of a smile breaking through her shaken mask. Link quickly composed himself, stood up, and offered an apologetic smile. We weren't doing anything wrong," he stammered nervously. "We just—" "You may wish to return these," Ciara said, holding out the 2 fishing rods. "And do try to stay out of trouble." "I don't go looking for trouble," Link said. "It just finds me." Ciara mused, sounding like she didn't believe him. "So I've noticed. We need to move soon, so I suggest you hurry, unless you would prefer to walk." "No thanks," Link said quickly. "Then hurry up, and you, girl." Malon squeaked, startled as Ciara addressed her. "Yes, Mistress Ciara?" she asked nervously. "Do try and wake your father up quickly," Ciara said with an air of amusement. "What?" Malon glanced back at the wagon. Talon was indeed asleep, snoring. Somehow, he'd managed to sleep through the entire commotion. The guards appeared to have not taken much interest in the incident either. Most of them were sitting in a circle around a small campfire, while several of their comrades watched the surrounding hills. Once they returned the rods, Link and Malon found Talon still asleep. Malon shouted, shook him, and even slapped him, but his snores continued unabated. Not giving up just yet, Malon retrieved a bucket from the cart and stormed off down to the riverbank with a stream of muttering. She quickly returned, water slopping out of her bucket, and stomped over to the wagon. Link almost grinned, realizing what she was about to do. But Navi didn't seem quite so amused. Just as it seemed like Talon was going to be sopping wet, he stirred and yawned. Realizing that Malon was standing next to him with a pail of water, and knowing just what she intended, he jumped to his feet. All right, I'm up," he said sleepily. "Just give me a sec." "It's harder to wake up than you," Navi muttered. Link ignored her, and quickly trotted back to the wagon once more. After the encounter with Zora, the somber mood that had clung to their journey evaporated like the mist on a spring morning. Link found the rest of the journey to Kakariko more enjoyable. He watched the passing travelers and animals grazing in the fields with a rapt interest that Malon didn't share. He pointed out to peddlers and wagons that carried a curious array of trinkets that Link had never seen before. Curious to know what they were and what they carried, he pestered Navi and Malon with an endless barrage of questions. Malon got bored rather quickly and decided to have a snooze. Navi was a little more obliging, and even seemed determined to keep him occupied for a while. It was night when they finally arrived at the outskirts of Kakariko. They didn't stay in the town itself, though Talon did not say why. Instead, the wagon came to a halt outside a small farm off the main road, which belonged to Ciara. Wanting to keep Link away from prying eyes, she decided it would be a good place to stop for the night. Link felt bad for this, even when Talon reassured him that it was no big deal. Dinner was a simple meal of soup. Malon complained bitterly until Talon promised her something nice for lunch the next day. Once their bowls were empty and cleaned, the 2 children were ushered off to bed. Why is somebody after you so badly? Melon asked when they curled up in their beds. The question left Link feeling distinctly uncomfortable. A part of him just wanted to sink under the sheets and not come out. She probably wouldn't believe him if he said he was being hunted by a powerful sorcerer. She didn't know as much as Talon or Ciara did, and he was forbidden to tell her any of it. Navi glanced at him from the bedpost and then shook her head. I don't know, he lied. The words left a bitter aftertaste in his mouth, but he did his best to ignore it. Talon spared him an awkward silence when he opened the door. You two all right? He asked. We're fine, Papa, Melon said. Good to hear, Talon replied. Got an early start tomorrow. Best you get some sleep, both of you. Afraid it's cramped quarters, so we're all sharing a room. Link groaned quietly as Talon strode over to the remaining bed and sat down. With a tired yawn, the man kicked off his shoes and then lay down. It seemed like only seconds later that his loud snores were filling the room. It was loud enough to wake the dead. Well, Link thought, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of sleep. He didn't think any of them would, except Talon. Before the first tendrils of light crept across the winter skies, Link rose and prepared to leave with the others. Talon was last up, as everyone else swallowed a breakfast of warm porridge. Bleary-eyed and sleepy, Link dragged himself over to the cart. It had taken ages to get to sleep the previous night. Navi, who hadn't slept a wink, was particularly annoyed. It was colder than ever as they reluctantly left the warm confines of Ciara's home. Link sat wrapped in a cloak and blanket on the back of the wagon, trying to get some extra sleep as the cart rattled its way down the road. Every bump jolted him back to alertness, and then he rolled over, trying to get to sleep once more. By dawn, they were traveling back over the Zora River. The hours went by, and then, as the sun rose to its zenith, they finally arrived at Castletown. Navi roused Link from his fitful slumber, and at the sight of the immense stone archway of the gatehouse and the brightly coloured flags which adorned it, Link's fatigue vanished at once. He gaped in awe at the enormous stature of the gatehouse. How could anyone build such a thing? The cart rumbled across the drawbridge that spanned the Zora River, and, as they crossed, Link couldn't quite work out why it looked so familiar. He didn't stay fixated on that oddity for long. Soon they were across the bridge and on their way into the town. A guard peered down at the wagon from the ramparts, while another stood at the far end of the bridge, looking rather bored. He was muttering to himself, stopping as he recognized Talon, to whom he smiled and gave a nod. Mornin', Talon greeted him before the guard waved them on. They didn't get far before they joined the crush of wagons that were making their way through the city gates. As they entered the city proper, Link wished he had a few more eyes. An array of brick, stone, and wood closed in on him from all sides. Flags of many colours draped the walls of buildings. Elaborate signs hung from shop awnings, beckoning potential customers inside. Link couldn't hear himself, or even the familiar rumbling of the cart, amid the clamour of musicians and people talking or shouting. It's huge, he said in astonishment. They approached a plaza, adorned by an elaborate structure of carved stone with water cascading down its side and into a basin below. That's a fountain, Navi said when Link asked. She was bombarded by dozens of questions as Link tried to take in the dizzying plethora of sights, sounds, and smells. Stalls lined the edges of the square, and Link caught a whiff of freshly baked bread amidst countless other smells. The scent of fresh fish, herbs, and other goods pervaded the air. Link wanted to check out everything, and wished Navi would stop saying no. What about that? He asked, pointing to a building from which he could hear the pleasant sound of music. That's a tavern, Navi said. What's a tavern? Somewhere you're not allowed. Why? Because it's where grown-ups go, as in Hylian grown-ups. The tavern was soon behind them, and Link busied himself with checking out what else there was to see. Hawkers cried their wares, including some shiny trinkets that Link wanted to go and examine. He noticed some shopkeepers seemed to be arguing with their customers, waving their arms all the while. Navi assured him that this was only haggling. They weren't really arguing. Well, most of them weren't. What's haggling? Link asked. You'll learn soon enough, Navi answered, sounding irritable. They'd both lost count of how many questions he'd asked now, and he still had plenty more. Link's ears soon picked up the soft trill of a flute as its melody pealed through the square. Finally, the cart stopped. Seeing a stall that was selling some delicious-looking sweets, Link clambered to the edge of the wagon. His mouth watered as he stared longingly at the tray filled with stuffed pastries and rolls topped with honey. It looked far more delicious than the porridge he had eaten this morning. "Where do you think you're going?" Navi asked, her stern tone making him all too aware of the fact that he wasn't meant to leave the cart. Link groaned, wishing that Navi would at least try to share his excitement, and then, reluctantly, he resigned himself to just looking around. Fortunately, it wasn't long until Talon presented him and Malon with a freshly baked pie, clearly trying to make up for yesterday's cold soup. When he received the pie, and the wagon was once again moving slowly through the crowd, Link bit into his meal. He closed his eyes for a second, relishing the delicious taste of the hot gravy and spicy meat. He quickly consumed the rest in record time, leaving nothing but scattered crumbs behind. He licked the grease off his fingers, smiling as he finished. "Do you ever eat slowly?" Malon asked when she saw this. Link didn't answer, for his attention was now focused on something else. The path to Hyrule Castle opened up before them, a broad strait that meandered between tightly clustered buildings, rising up the hill towards the enormous keep that loomed above all. The tall, stout walls that wreathed the royal residence made Link think that sneaking inside would be nearly impossible. All too soon, the wagon slowed to a halt outside an inn named the Silver Mare. A tall gentleman with balding hair and wearing an apron with a white horse embroidered on it greeted them. "Talon," he called cheerily. "Was about sure you weren't turning up. What took you so long? Your brother's been here looking for you." "Sorry, Galad," Talon said as he swung down from the wagon seat. "Ran into a bit of trouble on the ranch." Galad and Ciara shared a glance as the woman strode over to greet him. "I'll explain later." That was what that look said. Link could see that much. "Damn wolves getting to your herd again?" Galad asked Talon sympathetically. "Bellin told me something had happened, but he wouldn't say what." "I'll tell you later," Talon said, gesturing subtly towards Malon. "Care to help me unload some of this?" He gestured a thumb towards the cart. No sooner had he done so than two young men emerged from the shadows of the inn. "Oi, shove over, kid," one called, and Link almost glared. He jumped off the cart anyway, Malon following suit, and the men began to unload some of the cargo from the wagon. "So, this is the young lad I've heard about." Link froze as Galad's eyes fell on him. "Well, no use standing there, boy. Say your goodbyes and come inside. You must be freezing." He gave a nod to Talon and went back inside the inn. Link stared after him. How did that man even know who he was? "Go on, Link. Ciara will take care of your needs from here," Talon said. He gave Link a hearty pat on the shoulder and then spoke with a gentle seriousness. "And if you need somewhere to stay, once things are settled down and safe and all, I could always use an extra hand on the ranch. You'd be more than welcome. Remember that."
Thank you," was all Link could manage.
"We'll be back soon enough." Talon turned towards the cart, leaving Malon beside Link. To Link's shock, Malon hugged him.
"I'll miss you, fairy boy."
"You too, Malon," Link mumbled, feeling a little embarrassed. He wasn't entirely taken to that nickname. "That's the last of them, Talon, sir," called out one of the youths who was carrying another box over to the inn. Link was surprised that they'd managed to unload the cart so quickly. "Well, best be off. Come on, Malon," Talon said, stopping as he looked over his shoulder. Malon met Link's eyes for a moment, and then she went back to her seat on the cart. "Come, let's get you inside." Link almost jumped, turning to find the Sheikah healer just behind him.
"Aren't we going to the castle?" Link asked.
"It's best if you wait here. I'll bring someone who wants to meet you. Don't worry, Galad's a good man. He'll take care of you." Ciara ushered Link into the inn. Galad gave her a cheery greeting from behind a counter as she gave a few rupees and then directed Link upstairs. The Sheikah left without another word, and Link waited with Navi in the confines of his room. And waited. By late afternoon, Link was worried. He peered out at the bustling city streets for any sign of Ciara. Another woman came into the room with a tray of food, and when he asked her where Ciara was, she just shook her head and offered him a smile before leaving. Just as she reached the door, Link asked if he could have some sweets, like the one he'd seen at the stall in the market. The woman just smiled.
"I'm afraid that's all for you, dear."
She left the room.
Well, it was worth a try, Link thought. Trying not to worry about Ciara's whereabouts, Link scoffed down the peppery stew in record time and kept waiting. Soon, his anxiety was making him wish he hadn't eaten so fast. "What if she doesn't come back?" he asked Navi eventually. "She will." Navi didn't sound confident. Link wondered if Talon and Melon would still be in the market. Should he go and find them? Restless, and deciding that he didn't want to be in this room any longer, Link decided to do just that. When he made his way downstairs, Gallad quickly spotted him and steered Link back up into his room. "Ciara will be back soon, don't you go worrying yourself, lad." He shut the door, leaving Link staring morosely at its wooden frame. Not to be dissuaded so easily, and hoping Navi wouldn't disapprove, Link waited until he heard the man's footsteps descend the stairs. Once they faded, he walked over to the table and hauled it towards the window. It was a difficult task, and time-consuming. The table scraped and bumped with each shove, and Link hoped nobody downstairs could hear it. With each creak, scratch, and bump, Link feared that Gallad would come back into the room, or someone else, and he doubted they would be happy to find him trying to escape. After quite some effort, he finally got the table against the windowsill, and, to his relief, nobody came knocking. Working on the next part of his plan, he pulled the window open, and then pushed the shutters aside. Navi protested loudly, threatening to get someone, but she couldn't really, because she was stuck in the room with Link, and the only way out was through the window. Clambering out onto the tiled roof was easy. "Link, we really should wait," Navi said as they looked up and down the street. "Navi, Ciara would have come back by now. Something's happened to her. We have to get to the castle ourselves." Navi went silent, and Link knew, despite all her misgivings, that she agreed with him. There was a reason the Sheikah hadn't come back. Had she simply disappeared, like the Sheikah who were meant to be protecting London Ranch? What if another one of Ganondorf's people had found Ciara? He didn't want to wait at the inn until they found him too, just as they had on the ranch. His course decided, Link slowly made his way along the roof, careful to make sure none of the tiles were loose before he stepped on them. He didn't think that it was too different from climbing a tree. You still had to consider every movement to avoid tumbling into the air. He tried not to think about that. The mere thought of what would happen if he wasn't careful made his stomach thicken with nausea. Swallowing his fear, he considered his options, of which there weren't many. The stones looked far too smooth to climb, not at all like the gnarled trunk of a tree. He considered jumping onto the inn's second story, but that was just asking to be caught. There was another balcony which wrapped around the buildings next to the inn. An alley ran through the narrow space between the two, but it wasn't far to jump. He could make it. "Link, why don't I like that look?" Navi asked. Link was smiling, almost mischievously, as he made up his mind and peered over the edge. Knowing that Navi wasn't going to approve, but certain that it was completely safe, he didn't say anything. He just jumped and felt an exhilarating rush as he landed on the balcony of the inn's next-door neighbor. It looked like a house, or at least, Link thought it was a house, since there was no sign to announce the building's trade. He peered over the edge of the balcony to stare in fascination at the street below. Then, Navi flew in front of him, scowling, both hands firmly on her hips. "You and I need to have a good talk about being careful," she said, anger brimming in each word. "I was careful," Link said. She shot him a doubtful look. "No, you weren't. Just wait for me next time." "Okay," Link said absently. He moved away from the balcony railing in case any of the inn's patrons or staff noticed him. It occurred to him then that he hadn't given much thought on what to do after he'd left the inn. Find Ciara, he thought, or get into the castle. That was going to be tricky. How was he supposed to find his way around the city? He tapped a finger on his chin, thinking furiously, and didn't notice the door open. "What are you doing?" an angry voice bellowed from behind him. Link whirled around, accidentally upsetting a flower pot beside him. He cringed, watching as it toppled over and smashed with a tinkering crash. "Oops." The rather large woman standing in the doorway glared at Link, then shifted her gaze to the broken pot, and then turned back to Link. Without another word, Link took off at a run. He could hear the woman shouting angrily as he bounded down the stairs and took off into the street. Once he was sure he wasn't being pursued, he slipped into an alley and tucked himself behind a barrel. Navi joined him, still scowling. I tell you to be careful, and then the next thing I know you're breaking things. Honestly, Link, you might not get away so easily next time. I didn't mean to break the pot, Link protested. She just startled me. I know. Just... Navi sighed, the fury melting away. You don't know much about this place, and there are still people looking for us. A city is not a place that you can fool around in or play to your heart's content. It isn't safe. Your sword and the emerald might make us a target for anyone wanting a few spare rupees. You have to be careful, okay? Link wasn't entirely sure he understood, but he nodded anyway. Navi made it sound like he'd done something wrong, and besides breaking something, which he hadn't done on purpose, he hadn't. Okay, he agreed, meeting her eyes. Good. In that case, we'd better get moving. The faster we can get to the castle, the better. They left the alleyway, and Link slipped into the crowd of people. Navi decided to lead them on in an indirect route towards the castle. This way, there was less chance of being spotted by somebody who might not have his best interests at heart. The side street seemed no less crowded than the main road. Wandering through the crowd of tall Hylians proved to be a daunting experience. They moved so fast and never took care to avoid walking straight into him. More than once, somebody bumped into him and nearly sent Link tumbling to the cobblestones. Most cursed or yelled at him for being in their way. Link didn't hang around to listen to their angry tirades and hastened on his way. Why is everyone in such a hurry, he wondered. Are they all this cranky? With the odd exception, it was like being surrounded by dozens of Ingos. Link swallowed the nervous lump that rose in his chest and pressed on, not allowing himself to be intimidated by the forest of people despite their size. While some of the children he spotted played along the edges of the street, some eyed him with suspicion, even hatred. Once, 3 boys followed him, and there was something in the way they looked at him that made Link afraid. He'd been beaten by Mido's friends more than once, and he recognized the threat in their eyes. He knew he stood a good chance against them, but after what had happened to Mido, he didn't want to fight them. Heeding Navi's warning, Link hastened his pace and quickly tried to lose them. He detoured, noticing that Navi was angrily cursing herself for letting him escape the inn. Their detour led Link into a less wealthy part of town. It smelt horrible, and several wagons were collecting what looked like dung. As Link decided to head back for the main road, sure he was no longer being pursued, a beggar grabbed him, his dirty fingernails digging into Link's arm. The state of the gentleman's clothing, the smell of it, and the sight of his decayed teeth that made his grin truly terrifying, made Link want to flee. Never had he seen something so wretched and destitute. By reflex, Link's hand snatched at his sword. It was the beggar's turn to step away, letting go of Link. Torn between apologizing for nearly drawing his sword and the need to flee, Link fled, unable to form the words. After that, he was nearly ready to head back to the inn. Navi offered to fly back and offer the beggar a rupee, but Link didn't want to be parted from her. He sat by a stall selling fruit for a moment, letting himself recover. The stall owner must have thought he looked lost, for she took pity on him and gave him an apple. Link took it, considering going back to give it to the beggar, but he spotted one of the children he'd seen earlier lurking in the shadows. Eager to avoid confronting them, Link abandoned the thought and made his way back to the main road. Ahead, he saw a building with an insignia of 2 swords painted onto its rather worn sign. Navi read the inscription for him. Death Mountain Smithies. It's dangerous to go alone. Take these. Another shop front featured a pile of cages, each with a squawking chicken. They did not look too happy with their accommodation, nor did they appear particularly friendly. The sign in front of them read, Highly Aggressive Hylian Cuckoos, the perfect solution for any farmer looking to remove foxes or wolves from their land. Navi scoffed when she finished reading the sign. Yeah, like anyone will believe that. At one street corner, Link spotted a shop with a picture of 2 masks, each wearing a broad and beaming smile. The sign at the front of the store read, Happy Masked Man's Shop, magical masks to suit all your needs. This gave Link an idea. I wonder if they sell masks that can make you invisible, he asked. Navi frowned doubtfully, but he continued on anyway. It might help us get to the castle, and besides, we wouldn't be pursued anymore. I've never heard of any masks that can do that. Navi frowned. She paused, pursed her lips, and then added, except one. Link looked up at her questioningly, and Navi continued. Remember how I told you I was there when the Great Decatree was cursed? Link nodded. You think it made the Desert Man invisible? He asked. That, or it made him impervious to the wards that protect the forest. Or both, Navi said thoughtfully. Bang! The shop door burst open, almost tearing off its hinges as it crashed straight into Link. The blow stunned him, and for a moment he barely realized he'd just slammed into the cobblestones. Damn it, kid! A woman yelled. Watch where you're going! Breathing through the pain, he looked up and his insides instantly froze. Standing at about twice his height, with olive skin, red hair, and white clothes, was a Gerudo. He scrambled upright, almost heedless of the pain throbbing through his head. He reached for his sword, and the woman snorted. Do yourself a favor, kid, she said, sounding amused. Don't even try. Link let his hands fall to his side. The smile on the Gerudo's face was positively terrifying. He took a step back, swallowing nervously. The woman rolled her eyes. Relax, kid. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be standing staring at you. Link backed away a little more, wondering if he could quickly slip into the crowd and run before the Gerudo had a chance to pursue him. Then she said the words he'd been hoping he wouldn't hear. You're the forest boy, aren't you? She asked. The one that went missing a while back. She knows who I am, Link thought. He was ready to run, but he wasn't sure he could lose her, or if she'd just grab him and haul him all the way back to her king. He vowed not to tell her anything. It's all right. I won't tell anyone you're here. A few days ago I might have, but... The Gerudo paused, all trace of her smile gone. She looked troubled. Then she shook her head. Never mind. I doubt a boy like you would understand. Not sure I do yet. A lot is going on. This town is not safe. Sheikah murdered in broad daylight. This place is the pits. Just do yourself a favor. Get as far away from here as you can. You can do that, can't you? I can, Link squeaked. Good. Without another word, the Gerudo darted off, leaving Link and Navi staring after her. Boy and Fairy stared at each other, neither voicing what the other suspected. The Sheikah meant to guide them to Hyrule Castle was dead, just like the guards in Hyrule Field. At least he was certain they were dead. Nobody would tell him. We're on our own, Link said. And not for the first time since arriving in Castletown, he felt alone and afraid. Everything about the city seemed unnatural and strange. He wanted to find Malon and Talon. He wanted to go back to the woods. A sea of unfamiliar faces peered down at him, some friendly, others not so friendly. He was surrounded by people, and completely alone. We can't give up now, Link. Come on. Let's see if we can find something in here, Navi encouraged him. I'm sure we can still find our way to the castle ourselves. Feeling a little numb, Link nodded and walked through the door of the mask shop and into the spacious room. Immediately, his eyes watered at the nauseating display of bright colors. Ribbons draped the walls, and a rug of royal blue covered the floor. On the shelves, there was a fascinating array of masks in all shapes and sizes. There were masks of animals, masks with broad smiles. Link thought these were rather creepy. They reminded him of the beggar. And masks with their faces twisted into a snarl. There were others that Link couldn't even begin to contemplate what they represented. What is this place? He wondered aloud. It looked weird. All these grinning masks felt creepy. As if in answer, a high-pitched voice broke out in song, startling him. It took Link a second to locate the source. It was a mask with a lavish smile. What is that? He asked as the merry singing continued. A talking mask, Navi said, sounding very unamused. How annoying. What's it doing? Singing a Hylian carol. Oh, don't mind that, a voice called cheerily from behind them. It's just saying hello. They're quite handy when you're in the back of the... well, I haven't seen you around here before, have I? Link spun around to see a man standing behind the counter. He was a lanky individual in blue robes, his pointy ears poking out beneath his neatly combed red hair. The man was hunched over slightly, and his smile spread from ear to ear as he clapped his hands together in apparent delight. Hi, Link said, feeling greatly unnerved by the elaborate gesture. The mask by the door finally stopped singing. Link breathed a quiet sigh of relief and was pretty sure Navi did as well. Still trying to take in the array of masks lining the shelves, he approached the counter. A tome, lying flat on the countertop, caught his attention. He glimpsed a picture of a heart-shaped mask. Seeing what the boy was looking at, the shopkeeper quickly snapped the tome shut, and Link almost jumped back at the force of it. I didn't see anything, he said, voice draining from nerves. Honest. One cannot help the curiosities of such a young mind. But a boy like you must be careful, the man chided him. Great, Link thought. He sounds just like Navi. The similarity ended there. The man's smile widened again, and he gestured with an elaborate bow. Well, in that case, welcome, my dear friends, he chimed. Welcome to the Happy Mask Shop. It's always so delightful to see a new face. We sell the finest masks from all of Hyrule and beyond. Masks bound to give you everlasting happiness. This guy was seriously weird. Some of the masks looked more like they were intended to frighten someone to death. They were more likely to bring everlasting sleep than everlasting happiness. No wonder that Gerudo had been so eager to get out of the shop. She didn't look like the type who could tolerate this man for long. Link managed, swallowing before he tried again. Your sign says you sell magical masks. Indeed, I do, the man beamed. We have a lot of masks. Let me think. He placed a finger on his chin and glanced sideways at Link. Ah, yes. Some of these would go nicely with your costume. He waved a hand at the masks on either side of the shelf behind him. Among the dozen or more on the shelves, Link spotted a yellow fox-faced mask. There was another, which seemed to be a rather demented-looking smiling skull, and a third that was a bright yellow and shaped like the floppy ears of a bunny. How about this one? The man gestured at the bunny ears mask. It would be perfect with your costume. Link blushed, and Navi burst out laughing. No, the masked man asked as Link wrinkled his nose in disgust. Definitely not, Link said. He shot a death glare at Navi, who quickly stifled her mirth. I'm not wearing a costume, he said, feeling annoyed. I'm a Kokiri. Of course you are, the man said dismissively, clearly not convinced. Do any of the other masks take your fancy? We're not from around here, Navi said. We're from the woods, near the edge of Farron Province. The man's small eyes spotted Navi, as if he'd only just noticed her for the first time. He squinted and frowned. A boy and a fairy. How intriguing. Very intriguing indeed, he mused softly. I thought you must have been a child with a pet fairy. Navi stared daggers at the word pet. I'm after a mask that makes you invisible, Link said loudly, his face going red. Invisible? All trace of the man's smile vanished. No, my dear boy, I'm afraid I don't have anything like that. His eyes fell upon the scars across Link's face, and he grimaced. I was sent a shipment of invisible masks, but it seems that they were misplaced. A flicker of annoyance passed across the man's face. I am terribly sorry, boy. I cannot help you, but if you change your mind... He gestured towards the group of kids' masks. No thanks. Link left without another word. He didn't like the strange blue-robed Hylian, and decided he'd rather be as far away from him as possible. Suddenly, dealing with a beggar, or those kids, seemed like a better option. As they walked out of the shop, Navi gave a snort of laughter. What? Link asked as he shut the door. I was just thinking how cute you would look in that bunny ear hat. What, with that green... Hey! Link protested, blushing furiously. There was suddenly a commotion from the store selling Hylian cuckoos. It appeared that two of the chickens were busily attempting to peck each other apart. With an exasperated cry, an assistant reached the cage of the offending bird. A third cuckoo joined the fray and attacked the assistant, and a second boy came to his friend's aid. Once the animals were separated, minus a few feathers, they were thrust quickly into another cage. Little regard was given to their safety or comfort as they were rehoused. It was a little wonder why, for as the cloud of feathers settled, Link noticed that both the shop assistant and his friend were covered in scratches. Looks like the store sign wasn't kidding. I swear, somebody has magically altered those chickens, Navi muttered. Retreating from the spectacle, they kept going. Still aware of what had happened to Ciara, Link kept himself in the thick of the crowd and hoped nobody would spot him easily. He feared that Gerudo might go back on her word and send someone after him. The sooner he was away from the mask shop, the better. As he got closer to the castle, the crowd thinned out, and Link spotted something large and orange next to a stall that sold armor. He took it for a tall boulder until he noticed that the orange creature had arms, legs, and a pair of eyes. Navi, what is that? He asked. The creature's mouth moved as he spoke to the Hylian next to him. The man was about the same size as Talon, and even then, he barely came up to the giant's shoulders. Even from here, Link could hear its low, guttural tones. That is a Goron. They're the same ones that made your sword, Navi replied. Gapora retrieved it after they brought it part way. Link thought his sword would have looked like a butter knife in the Goron's hands. A very sharp butter knife. Come on, Link, said Navi at last. We shall keep going. Link left the stall and reached the gates that stood ahead. They were wide open, but even as Link thought about it, there was no way he was getting in there. Soldiers in uniform stood guard, and more watched from the wall. There were at least 20. No getting in that way, Link thought. You want me to try flying in, Navi suggested. I don't know the person Ciara was going to meet, but I could try and find them, or Zelda. He didn't like the idea of waiting on his own while Navi went hunting for Zelda. What if she couldn't find him, or worse, the Gerudo showed up and grabbed him, or somebody else? That very thought made him look around, at the thickening throng, but none of them resembled a Gerudo. Let's have a poke around first, he said. Just as he spoke, he felt a hand in his pocket. He spun, saw a boy pull his hand away, and realized he was holding Saria's ocarina. Caught, the boy started to run. Seeing Saria's ocarina in his hands, Link forgot all caution and charged after the thief. Give that back, he cried, all sense giving way to anger. The boy entered an alley, and Link was only a few steps inside before he realized his error. Suddenly, where there had been one child, there were 5 surrounding him. They were taller than he was, and they looked mean. One look at them, and Link knew they were not well off. Dirt stained their clothes, they wore no shoes, and their hair was unkempt. He was reminded of the beggar he'd seen earlier. You look like you've got some interesting stuff on you, the taller boy said smugly. Think we might just take a look. His eyes turned to the boy with Link's ocarina, who was busily tussling with one of his companions as they tried to take the instrument from him. The others stopped their argument when they felt their leader's eyes on them. At least, Link assumed he was the one in charge. Hey, what you got there? The tall boy stared at the thief holding Link's ocarina. It's just an ocarina, the thief replied. Link watched the boy turn it over in his hands, resisting the urge to fight and rip it free. Think I might just be keeping this? His grin was mocking. Might fetch a few rupees. It's mine, Link said fiercely. That drew their attention back to him, and the tall one scowled. You watch your tone. He stepped forward. Link swallowed, and without moving, he tried to open his awareness to his surroundings. There were 2 ways out, both blocked. One led deeper into the warren of alleys, where Link was certain he'd encounter more trouble. The other led back into the crowded streets. A third option, climbing the walls on either side of him, seemed impossible. The stones were too smooth, no nooks or handholds. He could sense 2 of the other kids behind him, and knew he couldn't go any further back. He'd have to fight, even if his instincts were screaming at him that this was wrong. Careful, one of the others cautioned. I bet he can use that thing. Pfft, the eldest laughed. Look at him. He's barely old enough to be a squire. I reckon he's a girl, another piped up. He's even wearing a skirt. Link felt the heat rise in his face as laughter rippled around him. Fury rose in him, and he drew his sword. The effect was instant. The mocking laugh suddenly ceased, and there was a moment of tense silence. "I can use it," Link said, trying not to let his fear show. He knew enough to know that once they sensed it, he would be in serious trouble. The tallest boy's eyes turned from fear to outrage. "Are you threatening me?" Link didn't say anything, his eyes fixed on Saria's ocarina. One boy made a loud "ooh." "Shut up," his friend hissed. Then he turned his gaze on Link. "Don't be stupid, boy. Give us your pretty sword and whatever else is in those pockets of yours, and you might still have some teeth left after we're finished with you." He balled his fist, and the others followed suit. Link's mouth was suddenly very dry. "Oi, city guard, stop right there!" a voice boomed. The kids jumped, and Link took the momentary distraction to lunge at the boy holding Saria's ocarina. He had no intention of causing them harm, but the feint worked. "Run!" somebody cried. "Here, take your stupid ocarina!" The thief threw Saria's instrument, and Link's breath caught in his throat as it fell. He wasn't close enough to catch it in time, even as he reached out to snatch it into the safety of his hand. Thoughts of Saria's ocarina, shattered and broken, flashed through his mind, but before he could reach it, a blur of light shot past him. Navi grabbed the ocarina, turned swiftly, and dropped it into Link's palm. Then she spun back around, hollering, "Pick on someone your own size next time!" Link looked up, saw the guard rush past him, 5 of his companions in tow. Then, as his pounding heart slowed and the heavy thuds of steel boots faded into the distance, Link stood there, feeling tears come to his eyes. Trembling, he clutched the ocarina, holding it close. He'd come so close to losing it and the emerald, again. It made him feel weak, powerless. "Link, they're gone now. I managed to get the guard's attention. When he saw you, he got help." "Oh." Navi's words came in a hurried rush and then faltered. "It's okay. The ocarina's safe. We're nearly there." "I promised Saria I'd keep it safe," Link mumbled, turning his eyes to the instrument, a hot rush of tears blurring his vision. Stupid, he thought, feeling ashamed. I hate crying. He should have been able to fight back, even knowing it would have ended with blood spilt. Navi fluttered to his shoulder. "It's safe. They're gone now. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you faster." Link sniffled. "I hate it here. Everyone's so mean. Or weird." "You alright, kid?" Link looked up, startled when he realized that one of the guards was looking down at him. "Did they take anything from you?" he asked more softly. "No," Link shook his head. "I got it back." "Glad to hear it." There was a gentleness to the man's tone that calmed Link, much like Talon's. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" "I'm not lost." Link was glad that he managed to sound more confident. Suddenly unsure of whether or not to tell the truth, he stepped back. All that armor, and the spear the man held, made for an intimidating sight. I'm okay. Thank you." The man looked confused by Link's reaction. His eyes went to Navi, and his confusion only seemed to intensify. Without another word, Link bolted. Link left the main road, far more cautious now. His steps carried him down a side street, which ended in a muddy lane. This one seemed empty, save for a dog sniffing in a gutter. Ignoring the hound, Link kept his sword drawn. It felt strangely comforting. He'd just have to hope the guards wouldn't notice. That'd probably get their attention. But what it also meant was that nobody else bothered him. There were some trees here that had grown close to the wall of the castle. Stubs were all that remained of the lower branches. The largest tree grew right over the wall itself, and most of its canopy was still intact. Normally, the tree would have been difficult, if not impossible, to climb, but not for a boy who had grown up in a treehouse. "Link, I'm not so sure that's a good idea," Navi said when Link pointed this out to her. "It's not that high," Link assured her. "I've climbed higher in the forest, and you almost killed yourself, according to Fora." "Did not," Link retorted. This earned him a skeptical frown from Navi. "We have to get the stone to the princess, and we don't have a Sheikah to help us anymore. And, besides, I don't want to hang around here with it on me." Navi muttered something under her breath when she realized that she was not going to talk him out of it. A house near the tree blocked it from view from the main road. Nobody would see Link climbing until he was a good way up. He was hoping nobody would see him at all. He looked up, trying to find the easiest way up, and started climbing. He grabbed onto the cracks and knots in the wood, heaving himself up and making sure he was steady before he found another hold. Navi guided him up to the stubs of the branches that had once formed the lower canopy. It was a slow climb, even though it was not that high. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Link reached the branch by the wall. He pulled himself up onto it, and then, gripping the branch with his arms and legs, he slowly slid across on his belly like a tree lizard. There was no one nearby. Most of the guards seemed interested in the gate. Stairs led down from the wall into the courtyard beyond. He could sneak in that way. The branch was too thin nearest to the wall, and probably wouldn't take his weight, so, after some quick thinking, Link jumped, cleared the gap, and landed on the rampart. Smiling at his success, Link turned to take in his vantage point. He could make out the pointed roofs of a sea of buildings that made up Castletown. He could see the southern market where he had come from, and the flags atop some of the houses which fluttered in the breeze. There was one flag bearing the symbol of a bear, another the head of a wolf surrounded by a wreath, and a third green banner bore a tree. Another displayed the sigil of a red lion upon a sea of blue. Hadn't he seen that flying from the castle gates as well? To the east of the southern square, an enormous temple rose high above the surrounding buildings, a grand edifice of marble and steepled towers. A single tower at the rear featured a white dome which gleamed in the afternoon sun. To a small degree, it reminded Link of the forest temple in the Lost Woods. "What is that?" Link asked, pointing towards the temple. "That is the Temple of Time," Navi explained. Looking nervous, she checked either side of the wall to make sure nobody was coming, and then added, "We shouldn't stand here. Someone will see us." Link nodded and stepped back from the edge of the wall. As he did, he failed to notice the sound of two people ascending the steps behind him. Navi whispered a warning. A gasp from behind startled Link, and he spun around. He caught sight of a young girl and a boy reaching the wall. Both of them looked shocked to see him standing there, their eyes wide. Link backed away and stepped out into thin air. With a cry of horror, he went backward and off the side of the wall. His vision went red as he collided with something hard, and the girl's voice chased him into darkness.